In the familiar sense, the weight of words is a metaphor. It means that words have an impact. Now, in this exhibition, words are impactful, but they're also often literally weighty, as in materially heavy. They're hanging on a wall, they're hanging on ropes, they're hanging on chains, they're on a hedge. You know, what is it exactly that happens when words are shaped and stretched and given some kind of lasting three-dimensional physical presence in public space?
The exhibition is the result of a long-standing collaboration between the Institute and Nick Thurston, who is Associate Professor of Fine Art at the University of Leeds. And we've been working with Nick for several years now, exploring the topic of sculpture and poetry.
We wanted to better understand the exciting space for making and for criticism that's being reconnected somewhere in between the worlds of sculpture and poetry. So that's with poets, sculptors, curators, editors, critics and historians of both art forms.
It was a kind of seamless move into making an exhibition on the subject.
There are 19 different artworks in the exhibition. They start on the facade of the building.
So Word Fishing is a brilliant project by the poet Anthony Varney Capildeo. The words "dear heart breathe" make you slow down and breathe as you come into the gallery space. Anthony became really fascinated by our facade, which is made of Ubatuba granite. They were thinking about geological and mineral history that's embedded into this material. The idea of being underwater and the vowel sounds, the 5 vowels, become these shoals of fish that swim across the facade and into the entrance of the building. And the first thing you encounter is the door completely covered in Mark Mander's newspapers. So you move through the words to get into the gallery. He wanted his work to look as if it had been just finished. And he realised that if he used real newspapers, that would tie the work to a particular date. So he started making his own, and it became a mission to include every single word in the English language. Some of the works are just funny, and I think the Slavs and Tatars Smazgat tongue is probably the best example of that. The forked tongue becoming a little gymnast on a podium it's a beautiful object, but it's also quite funny. Shanghai Lyric's approach to language, the humour in there is wonderful, taking the mickey out of Western consumerism in a really interesting and clever way.
New York. New York is a state in the northeastern and mid. Revolutig? No. Save the Queen.
Some of the works in the exhibition are quite haunting. Doris Salcedo's work deals with quite dark subject matter about the civil war in Colombia, and the weight of the concrete symbolises the weight of loss and the weight of the trauma. And then there's Issam Courbaj's Boat. And Issam's dedicated his artistic career since the Syrian uprisings to bringing attention to the plight of refugees, and I think his work does that so beautifully, that says so much more about that situation than words could ever say. In Emma Hart's work, there's a complete absence of language. Instead, what Emma has produced is a representation of a mouth and sound waves radiating from a mouth. There are 13 of the ceramic discs. The 13 represents a coven of witches. Witches as women who are speaking out and become themselves targets.
Fake.
Some of the works in the exhibition do relate directly to language, and I think Caroline Bergval's work is a really good example of that. Caroline uses language and the idea of mispronunciations, misinterpretations, and in this instance it uses Irish words, and Caroline's pronunciation of them, to express the idea that language can be a source of community and a source of identity and belonging, but it can also be a huge source of conflict. Well, one of the brilliant things about this exhibition was that we were able to work so closely with so many of the artists. So in some cases that was developing new work for the exhibition, like with Juyon Park's new project and with Tim Etchell's. And in many cases, the artists were very invested in the exhibition and came during the installation period to work with us to install their work in the gallery and show their work the way that they wanted it to be shown.
Poetry and sculpture, the two art forms have an age-old connection. And going even further back to ancient times, they were just two different modes for engaging in the ancient practice of poesis, of bringing forth something new into the world. But on top of that, we also have a very modern history of separating out the arts into distinct traditions and fields. Now, in this exhibition, we want to celebrate the fact that lots of artists and writers are reconnecting poetry and sculpture in really exciting ways.
I think there's something for everyone in this exhibition. It's sculpturally really exciting and it's poetically really exciting. And I think it combines to make something that every visitor will get something from.